Hi there, Michael Bovee with Consumer Recovery Network, and thanks for tuning in to our YouTube channel, DebtBytes. Today I want to talk about settling with one of the largest debt buyers in the country, Portfolio Recovery Associates, or PRA. When you're dealing with PRA, you're dealing with usually old debts old enough for your creditor to basically have abandoned the idea that they're ever going to get paid a penny on it. This can happen at different times depending on the creditor. So you may have, they buy a lot of Care Credit accounts, GE Capital or now Synchrony accounts. So you might have gone maybe only 6 months to a year of not paying on those accounts, and PRA purchase them. You start hearing from them with phone calls and collection notices in the mail. There may be accounts that they purchased that maybe weren't paid for several years actually, and then you start hearing from them. So they purchase debts at all different times in the life cycle of an unpaid bill. They are also involved in collection of not just credit card debt. They pick up all kinds of debt. They'll collect on student loans even. So when you're dealing with PRA, you're typically dealing with the debt that they purchased. PRA is also one that uses their own internal collection resources. They have offices several places in the US. They are also pretty spread out over the globe with collection offices for wage arbitrage, but they also buy up and collect debt outside of the US. So they utilize all those resources to try and collect from you here in America. When you're dealing with those internal resources, the flexibilities are pretty fair. I mean, as far as like they're gonna settle if you can show a hardship, if you know your collectability score and I'll have a video out next week with a former debt collector to talk about how debt collectors read your credit score and how they kind of factor that into how much they want to try and get from you sometimes. So pay attention and subscribe to this channel if you'd like. But if you look like somebody who can afford to pay more than what you're offering, PRA can be sticklers. They can hold tight, okay? If you appear to be in a sincere hardship and one that's likely to continue moving forward, that flexibility is there with them. I do recommend that you settle with PRA in one lump sum wherever possible, but they do make payment options as part of their reduction. So let's assume for a moment that you were able to get them down to half, 50%. Very realistic expectation with PRA. And you needed to spread that out over 3 months. That's okay, they'll do it. I just don't like doing that, not just because it's PRA, but because when you're in a situation where life happened for you to be watching this video in the first place or to be having to deal with PRA, just because things might be a little different now and you're able to start looking at resolving your debt, that doesn't mean that life doesn't happen still. And something could come up where you're unable to follow through on that second or third or fourth or longer payments, and if you miss that, you lose the deal, it's off the table. And you'll have spent money up to that point towards a solution that wasn't a solution. It didn't actually resolve the issue. PRA sues a lot, so here's another side to them. They are one of the more litigious debt buyers in the nation. It's a huge problem, given the fact that they sue for the smaller balance accounts. So the lawsuits happen, and your ability to deal with PRA directly is usually cut off at that point. They have a network of national collection law firms that they work with. If the account is with one of those firms, you could call PRA and check, but typically you're going to find that you're going to need to deal with that collection attorney's office. I'm starting to see a little bit of a change in that, and this would be a good sign for everybody, not just PRA doing this, but I think a lot of debt buyers and collectors could benefit from doing business more this way, where their collection law firms, which are light on resources and sometimes do not have the greatest trained collectors, will utilize maybe resource back or maybe even contract back. I don't know how they do it. But I am finding that PRA is actually the contact center, their collection center is who will respond sometimes to you or who you'll get connected with when there's active litigation going on rather than the attorney, which would be cool. I'm only seeing it a little bit, so it's nothing to get excited about yet, but it's realize that could happen with you. More often though, you'll still be working with the law firm. Couple of cautions, okay, when you're dealing with a lawsuit from somebody like PRA. Depending on when you're watching this video at the time I'm recording this, it is still very complicated and difficult for a debt buyer like PRA to get documentation to back up their lawsuit. So they don't necessarily win on the merits of their case if they're challenged correctly. You don't know how to do that. You're a fish out of water when it comes to navigating the courts. It's a formal process. You have some really good protections and or a mechanism for forcing them to prove their case, and you should pursue those. But if you're not familiar with it, and most of us are not going to be, you should talk with an experienced consumer defense attorney, and I can refer you to some. Just post the name of your state and I can send you an email with resources. You can call in on the hotline. I'm option 2, and I can refer you, get your email address and refer you some resources that way too. So pay attention to the comments, participate in them. I can give you more feedback that way. A couple of other things. I'll close off with this. PRA is a bear, and it's unfair. They are a bear to get settlement documentation from. It's stupid. I think their management is silly for being so inflexible in this way. There are a couple of states in the US that have made it mandatory that when you're dealing with a group like PRA, that they have to document things, right? Send you even invoices if you're making payments and stuff, right? So California being one of them that passed recent laws that way. But most of the states, including mine, do not require anything like that from them, and they're real difficult. I often advise, do not send a debt collector money unless you have it documented. You might have to record their conference or your call with the debt collector and record that, tell them you're recording it, because of how difficult they are when it comes to getting documentation of your settlement. Again, it's a stupid thing when everybody is so familiar with doing it, and they do it. They just maybe not going to do it right when you're making a deal. It's a stupid thing to get hung up on. I bet they'd collect more if they were willing to document with people. So be careful of that. And then also, I'm very concerned about PRA's management team and their focus on how they work with third parties. PRA asks companies like mine over the years, last I checked, to fill out a form that says, you know, do I or don't I encourage people to send disputes to PRA? Well, you have a legal right to a dispute. So of course I encourage that. You may not even know about a debt. The debt they might be collecting on is totally wrong and inaccurate and not even yours, which happens. So you have to be aware that you have rights and that you can protect them. Companies that might engage in sending disputes, they're looking for, apparently, to dissuade doing any business or won't allow you to work and connect with them electronically over the phone to resolve debts because you don't meet some criteria. And if that's a criteria, in my mind, they're conspiring to keep consumers from accessing their rights with debt collection or other debt collectors or perhaps debt settlement firms. I'm not a big fan of PRA, as you can tell, for those 2 reasons. The fact that they don't release documentation of what they're agreeing to do with you in the first place. It's just a silly practice. They're going to be forced to do it eventually. Why not get used to it? And I really question management's decision on how they work with third parties, or at least those forms that they've asked me and some of my associates to fill out about whether or not we advise consumers to send disputes. Of course we advise our clients and consumers to protect their rights. So that's really questionable. Makes me wonder what else is under the hood. But when it comes to you being able to reach them and resolve a debt, you know, 50% is usually a good expectation, sometimes lower if you can convince them that you're in a hardship and it appears to them from everything that they have access to that this is as good as it gets and they should take the deal. They have a little bit of flexibility with payments again. Good luck. If you have questions or concerns about dealing with Portfolio Recovery Associates, lawsuit, whatever it is, post in the comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.